All right, I think everybody hears us. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is a first session of another go around, and I really can't tell you how excited I am for this one in particular. Now, tonight we're going to start off with a wonderful introduction to a friend of ours everybody knows very well. His name is Stephen Jonathan. Stephen, how are you?
Hey, Frank, I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, and it's great to have you on. And, have you ever been part of a book club before, Stephen?
It depends on what you mean by that. As a school teacher, I'm a literature teacher, so I'm part of a book club every day of every year, in a real sense. And then I've read books with friends and with small groups. So I guess you could say I've been parts of countless book clubs, but maybe not exactly like this.
Oh, it's going to be great. Then I think you're going to really thrive. I'm telling this to a teacher over here. Anyway, what we have here is a classic, Lloyd C. Douglas, The Robe. Now, Stephen, what I just want to do is I want to get some, basic thoughts. I'm going to go through some of things that I have written down over here, things that hit you, anything that you take away from it. And then we're going to just jump into what the audience has seen, because doing this with the audience is just incredible. We almost don't have to do anything at all. But what we have here is the opening. You have Marcellus. Marcellus is the only son of Cornelius Gallio, and of course, her husband, a senator, the brother of Lucia. That's the Marcellus is the brother of Lucia, or Lucia. I don't know. I see that I go Lucia, but Lucia recounts the fact that her father, the senator, spoke harshly about a local official, the Prince Gaius. And immediately after that, Marcellus, her brother, who is a tribune, and he goes off to talk about how he laughed openly at a long-winded ode to Gaius a couple of nights before. And though Gaius is sleeping, they assume that somebody's going to tell him that Marcellus laughed and it's going to be hell to pay. Now, from there, we have a situation where Lucia says, Marcellus, you have to go say sorry to him. You have to apologize, whatever. He says, okay, I'll figure it out. Goes to talk to his father, the senator, who says, no, don't apologize. How dare you? And right here's where I want to start for a second. Stephen, I love the parts in here that are really all about relationship management. And I love the strategy and understanding what politically, you can call it Machiavellian if you want, but where an apology is warranted, where it is completely self-effacing, and why you're going to debase yourself in public. And it ties hand in hand with this whole elite versus the slave class portion of the book as well too, and then it sets us up for bigger things. What did you think about just the development of the initial characters and all that stuff at first?
Well, the book itself is historical fiction, and it's about a time 2,000 years ago that's really exciting. It's one of my favorite genres, historical fiction, and then this time period. So I think anyone who reads this book is going to enjoy a little bit of time travel, if that type of thing is possible. And Lloyd, he gets into all the right themes. It's about political power, spiritual development, about relationships, about slavery. And what's really great about this is that we can literally, if we read this correctly, get out of our age and examine these vital issues from another age's viewpoint. And that's the real gold here. So I love how the political intrigue, the virtue, the Roman manly virtue versus the Gaius fat and lazy thing. It's really beautiful. So there's a lot going on here, and it's worth digging into every single aspect of it.
Yeah, and the another point on that is that where Douglas, the author, injects historical timelines, really great historical timelines. You get the sense of how the Roman society was already very rotten. Even things like this, you learn about the Praetorian Guard, the Order of the Tribune, how that all started out as a very elite force. It kind of ends up almost like the modern American National Security Council, where everyone gets on as long as you just make a donation. But it's again, the reason why I bring that up, this setup with Marcellus and Gaius, the kind of fat, lazy but very powerful senator, is that because of this slight, because of this insult, we are immediately given a commission. That's it. Marcellus is given his first commission as a commanding officer. And where do they send? They think, oh, this is going to be great for him. He's going to go out there, test his manhood, as you said. And he is very, very, very noble. You'd think he did not become the spoiled rich kid. He trains hard. He's got a good sense of loyalty and honor. And you can see that is the thing that is mostly lacking in so much more of the Roman society. But where do they send him, Stephen? They send him to
Minoa.
A place, Minoa.
South Palestine, yeah.
Gaza.
Minoa Fortress. It's unbelievable. It's the sticks. And it's obviously it's the worst punishment or insult you could give to a senator's family son.
Yeah. And, and that's the other thing here, too. When you talk about the history that they give you, I love the banter between characters about Minoa, where, what it is, this outpost out there, the kind of people who are put out there, and of course, the way that part of the world is managed. You say to yourself, holy crap, nothing has changed, has it? It's just there's just a lot of problems. But just to cut to the chase, they're sent out there, and Marcellus agrees to go on. Well, there's nothing to agree to. He says goodbye to his mother, says goodbye to his sister, but he does get to take his loyal servant and slave, the Corinthian Demetrius. So it is Marcellus and Demetrius going out to Palestine, and they're about to really see what they're up against. And on the way there, they do a little bit of talking, and they actually strategize as to what the best approach going into Minoa is going to be, because it is essentially like prison survival. You have to get in there and you have to beat up the biggest, baddest guy first thing, or else you're a marked man. Talk about a little bit about the arrival of Minoa.
That's right. They had to challenge the locals there. And as we learned early in the first chapter, people that get sent to this as leadership usually need to be replaced very shortly. So it really is like prison life, going into this really roughneck sticks area, wildland. It's a badlands. It's really an incredible scene. Frank, can I back up just a little bit?
Absolutely.
I had some introductory remarks about something a little more global.
Yes.
About how we read in a book club. And this is what I do with my classes. And I should have squeezed this in the beginning, because we're right in the middle of the plot right now, which is amazing. So I'm sorry for this interruption.
No.
But as readers, we live in a very strange age. And what you're bringing up, Frank, about how stepping back into time is really stepping into things we're familiar with, is very, very true. But we have to be really careful about a condition we've been subjected to called chronological snobbery or anachronism. So coming to this work, it would be ideal if we were able to kind of get out of ourselves and get out of our age, or kind of this notion of progressivism or chronological snobbery that says we are in the best age ever, and we kind of look back on this age as a bunch of country bumpkins, and we ought not to do that. These ancient Romans are educated, they're intelligent like we are. It's not some past time that's so different from our age. So as readers, I suggest we really check our anachronisms. We really check how we superimpose ideas from this age onto the past, because there's permanent things we have to admit to, like good and evil, virtue and vice, and these characters. We all share a nature with all these characters. And we're going back to the time where our Lord was crucified, which is an amazing age. So the universal things that are exactly the same are things that are permanent, like human nature and virtue and vice. Now, the things that are different are our modern sensibilities, that if we can set those aside, we're going to be much better off. I just wanted to make that point.
It's a wonderful point. Modern sensibilities about things like, slavery and all that. But
Right.
the only real thing that has separated us is technology and fashion. And this is something that's been driven home for me a long time ago from other literary mentors in my life, that a really good piece of work is going to talk and speak directly to the human condition that is ageless. You can date yourself in any number of ways, and of course you can put it into a period piece, but it doesn't matter what period it's in. We're human beings. And the one thing I do love about this, though, and I expected it to be a little bit like this because I had one of the earlier I think around like a 1953 printing that my grandfather had. And I didn't want to, I just have it on my shelf. I bought myself another version so I can mark this one up. But that one, Stephen, is all marked up with all of his own notes because he was adapting this for the stage. And when I'm reading this, especially on like page 31, I think this when Lucia goes off on an angry tirade about Rome. She says, like Romans, she mocked, behave like Romans. And what does a Roman ever get for being brave and pretending it's fine and noble to give up everything, to make believe it's glorious to suffer and die for Rome, I hate Rome. I read this and I'm thinking, man, this is made for the stage. It reads like a play. I love it. So it's already very classic in its delivery. But again, there's something about the way that Lloyd C. Douglas writes that I can actually, I don't know, I can smell the pergola. I can. There's something like I'm putting myself in there, like you said. Suspend disbelief, get yourself in there, because these conversations between soldiers and everything, they are so modern, and it's really. But then it gets you even more excited to know what's the backdrop here. And we're skipping over a lot, but I know the audience is going to be able to fill in the blanks. The backdrop here is that, the backdrop is that they're going in there to provide a little bit of a security detail during the Passover, which is essentially Demetrius gets to be at Palm Sunday. And for me to read most of the pages yesterday on Palm Sunday, I was like, this was such perfectly picked, if you ask me.
Perfect timing. Perfect. Yeah.
So, I don't know. In that respect, I wanted to get a little bit into the in between. There's a lot of things that happen in between. They're talking about God, that hypothetical God that they bring up. They're just picking apart the Roman mythologies, but also picking apart the one God, the Abrahamic God as well. So it's like all those same kind of, what are we here for? What's our purpose, and who is really behind the helm? It's they make it very timeless in that respect.
That's right. And remember in chapter 3 when Demetrius, remember, his family got politically persecuted. His father got killed. His mother committed suicide. His brother and sister got killed, and he was sold into slavery. And it was interesting when Marcellus asked him, do you believe in the gods? And he said, the last time I prayed was the day my family got taken away. And I thought that was really interesting to watch his struggle in the beginning, answering the questions about his own religion. Really vital, and applies to us today as we ask ourselves, how do we believe in God? It was really a profound moment and the beginning of a seed that grows throughout the whole book.
Yes. And of course, to get to the point where they are even able to have these bigger conversations about God, they have to settle into Minoa. And, when they get there, we said before, Demetrius and Marcellus, they have this talk about, what is the play going to be? And he went in there, and probably around page 50, 51, what a dramatic scene, where Marcellus goes in there against Paulus, and they have a sword fight. And he's throwing swords into the wall just for dramatic effect. And everybody's just okay. And it was, that was cool in itself to have that kind of action in there, because I was like, all right, let's go at it. But the thing that really got me, Stephen, was how he actually won over. He says, there's a lot of self-reflection there. There's not going to be able to, not through coercion is this going to work. Something has to give. And it was Sextus, the other man who was actually, kind of like kind of follows Paulus around. I think one of his right hand guys, when he breaks his leg, and Marcellus says, "Where is he? He's not here at the the hall for food. Oh, his leg is broken." To go there and take that opportunity again, wonderful, wonderful management of your crew, to show care, to give his leg to feed him, to prepare his food himself. At that point, that's when Demetrius says it's the first night since they got there in Minoa he didn't have to sleep with a dagger under his pillow. At that point, you can just get down to business, and this was going to be the crew that they're going to go into Jerusalem with, and that's what we get shortly afterwards.
That's right. And paralleling how he won over Paulus and Sextus is exactly what happened in the beginning when the senator won over Demetrius. To give him back some of his dignity, he took off his chains and gave him directions to the house and said, hey, if he goes there, then he knows we're going to treat him fairly. And if he doesn't, then it's going to be worse for everybody. So I thought that was really interesting. It wasn't controlling, kind of like we're used to today.
Yes. Yes, well,
very manly and very respectful.
It is, and I love that, and especially in that classic sense of masculine and feminine, there's a wonderful buoyant balance to the whole thing. I don't really even, dare I say, even the slaves seem like they have maintained a level of dignity and power. There's that level of subservience, there's the obedience there. But there is a lot of dignity. There's just a lot of dignity in a lot of these characters, and I think that's something to be said. Now, what you're talking about with the gods and talking about spirituality, there was this one point. I think it might have been Marcellus who was talking about their. What was it? Oh boy, was it? Let him keep silent. He will have the need to explain his. The gods should prescribe this event, warning of golden afternoons, that there should be a great chorus sing. Okay, here you go. So it's around page 67, and they're having this big talk about spirituality and religion and how they believe a hypothetical God should behave and what life should really be like. And it talks about how, people go into these golden ages in their lives and they are at the height of their power, and then it is this slow, agonizing decline into senility, and then of course just uselessness, and you die. And they're talking about how wonderful it would be to, at the height of a person's power and influence and accomplishment, there is an ode to them, an honoring of them, and then almost like a flash they just kind of poof and dissipate and disappear. What did you take away from all of that stuff? What do you think that sets us up for, and why plant those thoughts in the mind of the reader, do you think?
I thought it was beginning the dichotomy between the material politicization of Rome compared to the spiritual realities of Jerusalem, and how that life was really utilitarian. It was all about duty and getting things done. And when you're done contributing, it's time to go. And that's radically different than the eternity promised through Jerusalem. And the God that literally drives Marcellus crazy. He loses his mind because of the radical difference between the political world of Rome and the spiritual world of Jerusalem. I think that's what it's starting to set us up for.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way, because I believe that's a good way of looking at it too. It was very profound to me, but I didn't understand. I guess I was one of those wait and see moments. But from there, it's also you get a little bit of angst out of Demetrius right before they're off to Jerusalem. You get a little bit of angst out of Demetrius there. Where was it when he was thinking about? He kind of screamed, "You can't do that! That you can't do that part." Let's see here.
Are you talking about when he gave the ring to Lucia and made his feelings for her known?
Oh no, but that was pretty big. No, that was in the beginning. That was earlier on. I'm talking
right before
about,
they left.
Yeah, I'm talking about page 68. This is after the conversation we were just talking about there about God or gods. He says, the nobler God, if he had any interest in justice at all, would appear at such a tragic moment and sternly declare, "You can't do that." Talking about Demetrius's family breaking up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Demetrius repeated the words aloud, over and over, louder and louder, until the high-walled ravine believed in them and said so. You can't do that, he shouted so loudly that Melis, far on ahead, turned back and looked inquiringly. And this is where a lot of that, going into the wilderness, the yearning to be free, they know, as they said here, pretty much Syria, that whole area in the Levant, that part, Syria is pretty much an outpost for a lot of slaves who have run away. And already Demetrius is here with Marcellus, and this idea of, should I take my opportunities here? And right at that time that he's starting to even let the conversation creep into his head, although he's hedging his bets, he's staying away, he's trying to keep himself protected politically and all that stuff. This is when they're attracted to the crowds in Jerusalem, and he lays eyes on Jesus on the donkey. So from your standpoint, how was that experience getting to now we're getting to the real subject matter, the yoke of the whole thing?
That's right. And I think the universal theme here is human suffering, and the fact that the extreme suffering Demetrius went through is the greatest challenge to God in the first place. We look at the book of Job, we look at all the suffering in this world, we look at all the violence and the horrible things, and we say, how could a benevolent God exist and allow these things to happen? And I thought that was really profound from Demetrius, which sets us up for what he's going to go through later in his conversion. And it's just deeply moving and deeply human. And I don't know if there's any of us who haven't experienced the kind of suffering that makes us even question the existence of the benevolent God. And I think that's what that's all about.
I'm going to just jump right into the thread here from everybody at home, and of course, stop at any point, interject anywhere, Stephen. This is our playpen right here.
Awesome.
Jalen Weddings says, I can't believe I actually thought about skipping this book. I'm so thankful I gave in and picked up a copy. Generally, when I'm reading for a book club, I keep a notebook at my side to jot down my favorite scenes or random parts that catch my attention. But with my first night reading The Robe, there was already too much to write down, or I wouldn't have had time to read the book. I felt that too. I started getting nervous. I was like, do I have to read this twice? Because I don't want to stop, By the end of chapter 2, I already concluded that this book will probably be in my top 5 books of all time. I wish I could articulate in my own words how well this was written. Anytime Demetrius enters the story, I'm completely and utterly enthralled. I feel like I must consume and digest every scene he is in, to the point that I'm reading it 2 or 3 times. He is the epitome of the word badass. I can feel that he is destined for great things in this book. The scene in which he says farewell to Lucia just rips my heart out now. Talk about the one that got away. There you go, Stephen. We've all been there. Every page thus far has been a masterpiece. Amazing pick, Frank. Also, there are tons of Roman ASMR videos on YouTube that you can set the mood to if anyone is into that kind of thing. Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go. A badass.
I want Jalen in my class.
I know.
That's the kind of student I want.
I bet you anybody, if you ever opened up an online class, I would be surprised how many people would just sign up for it. Let's see here. Here's another one.
Can I respond to that just very quickly?
Yeah.
What a fantastic idea, Jalen, to read it more than once. You were drawn into the world. Reading it again draws you further in, and I know what you mean. You don't want to take the time to reread it because you want to get further into the world. But it really is a great idea. Even that notebook idea is a great idea, and I love that you were dragged away from the notebook and into the story. But don't hesitate to take the time to read it again. We live in a time where we believe time is money. We don't have the time, but it is worth it. With your kind of vigor for this book, I just love that comment. Thank you for that. That was awesome.
Yeah. Cigar Kid says, what a great book so far, Frank. Thought the dialogue between Marcellus and his father talking about a possible slave uprising one day was very interesting. Bottom of page. I want to stop right there too, because that's something that I love. That's very subtle, because there is no until we get to those last 2 pages of these 4 chapters, you don't know. This could be a book that goes in any direction. Any direction whatsoever. If you don't know what it's about, you don't even think that Jesus is going to be a central part of it. But since you know that is where it is, I really appreciate the subtlety of always framing up how, whether it's in Jewish society or in Roman society, that the disparity between the rich, the elites, and those who have found themselves a comfortable place in the hierarchy of things is always so far removed from the poor, from the sick, from people who really, really are yearning for salvation and a taste of just a good life, not a rich life, a modest, good life. And so when you think about this, when you think about the concept of the slave and you think about liberation, then we start seeing where and I've only ever seen the movie, but you can start seeing where for someone like Demetrius, true liberation is probably on the horizon, and that feels so good, so I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I wanted to tap into also to that slavery theme. We're so anemic about slavery today, but what this book really draws out is that, in a sense, we are all slaves. There's no one who is liberated until, as you just suggested, they do that necessary spiritual growth to be liberated from the kind of slavery we're all beholden to. And if it's not the Greek slaves, even the Roman aristocracy is a slave. Marcellus has to be obedient to Prince Gaius as he sends him to his death.
Yeah,
that's an unnamed kind of slavery. So I just wanted to mention that too, because the theme is something really we ought to discuss. We weren't born to be kings and be free. We're offered that as a gift if the conditions are met.
Here at the bottom of page 19 to 20, Senior Gallio says, it would require a very shrewd and powerful government to keep in subjugation a force 3 times its size and strength. There you go. You say is there going to be a slave uprising? But what does that slave uprising look like? Is it because of course we know that the Roman Empire went Christian after a while. Gallio continues talking about Rome's government, a mere hollow shell, no moral fiber, content with its luxury, indolence, and profligacy. Its extravagant pageants in honor of its silly gods, ruled by an insane dotard. And talking about Biden, maybe, he says.
It's so applicable. It's so applicable.
It is. Yeah. It is. I've been looking for that because, of course, I always love asking that in the threads there. It's just like, what modern parallels do you see? And it's always crazy to me how no matter what the pick is, there is so much there for us to go through. Hell, this is it. And a drunken non-entity. So my son, here's another quote. So my son, Rome is doomed. I do not venture to predict when or how Nemesis will arrive, but it's on its way. The Roman Empire is too weak and wicked to survive. End quote. Kind of saw some parallels in that dialogue to our own government, and the modern day slaves of today are most definitely the working class. Thanks, Frank, and great read so far.
Yeah, to capitalize on that, America is the Roman Empire in its last years. So you see a 400-year decline in Rome because of the increase in technology. In the last 60 years, we're seeing what happened in Rome in the last 400. And it's bearing out. And there's going to be a slave uprising once we come to realize who the slaves really are in America.
That's it. The last page on chapter 4 with Demetrius and the Messiah on the white donkey gave me goosebumps. Me too. Me too. Wow is all I can say. What a book so far. What is he then? Demanded the Athenian, piqued by the Corinthians' aloofness. I don't know, mumbled Demetrius in a puzzled voice, but he is something more important than a king. I like pumped my fist.
Yes.
I pumped my fist at that voice. And wow, the intro. Wow. The introduction, I just love the flow. I mean, I could have spent 2 more chapters of them just, hanging out in the barracks in Minoa, the way that flow was going. And I just loved the conversations amongst the soldiers. But it is it's really, really cool at that respect. Anything you have on that? We can keep going though.
No, 100%. I really, as someone previously mentioned, dragging us into that era. Lloyd does this. He's like a time machine. So we get to go there and be there. And that's the way I felt at the end of chapter 4 too, is that we were watching Christ on Palm Sunday enter the city. It was phenomenal.
Oh yes, yeah. That in particular, I felt that we were there watching it through Demetrius. And here's the thing. Where's the end of chapter 4? Here you go. So that's on page 74. So I have to be on page 73. It's his description of him. He says the face of the enigmatic Jew seemed weighted with an almost insupportable burden of anxiety. You know, you sometimes you put on some of these biblical movies, and it's Palm Sunday, and Jesus is, you know, kind of going through like a rock star, and he's doing the Miss America wave to everybody. But to take this approach here, because you know he's a week out from death, and to have that knowledge that, man, we're getting real close. This is. I mean, that's incredible. The eyes narrowed as if it resigned acceptance of some inevitable catastrophe, stared straight ahead toward Jerusalem. Perhaps the man, intent upon larger responsibilities far removed from this pitiable little coronation farce, wasn't really hearing the racket at all. And also the knowing that at least some elements of that very same adoring crowd are going to be the ones condemning him. That's right. Know, at least some elements.
Well, the majority.
Yeah, it has to be.
I mean, at the end of the day, who didn't leave Christ? And he knew all this going in. But what a peace and what a serenity! It's just the exact opposite of the political world, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely, it is. Okay, let's couple more. Here we go. Heather, excuse me. Heather Peets says from chapter 3. Paulus and Marcellus' description of an ideal God, there you go, and proposed ceremony in which a worthy man's toga be treasured and passed to someone else grabbed my attention, along with the first sighting of Messiah in the chapter 4. You know, I didn't even think about that, about the passing of the toga and the fact that Marcellus is going to cast lots for his robe.
For the robe, yeah. What a connection.
I saw some parallels to the U.S. in chapter 4 when Marcellus says, the scepter is passed around. Egypt had her day, Darius, Alexander, the Caesars. He's summing up Israel's history of oppression at the hands of world powers, but also indicating that Rome will inevitably fall. No superpower lasts forever.
Prophetic and true. No doubt about it.
But those are the little things there that I think is really wonderful. Douglas will drop Egypt in there, Darius, Alexander, the Caesars, and you get these little reminders of the cycles and the people involved. And you're historical fiction is one of my favorite things to read, because I feel like I feel least guilty reading that. Like, oh, come on, you could be learning something right now. You want to read about fantasy. But you know, it's just so much in there, and I love that because it makes it so much more coherent, and it also reminds us that we're not reading about something that happened or didn't happen and was written about as another dimension. We are actually the latest chapter of this story. We are right now, this conversation, this book club, is taking place within the latest chapter of that never-ending story right there.
That's right. Empires rise and they fall. Political regimes rise and fall. But the kingdom of God, the eternal one, is that one that calls to our heart the most soundly. And yet it's also the most obscured in the world insofar as we're political.
Yes. Here's one from Gal 2, 2021. She says, not having studied Roman history too much, I was very interested to learn what a slave state the Roman Empire was. We learn a lot about the Roman attitude toward possessing slaves and viewing them as almost less than human. Page 3, quote, slaves weren't people exactly, but some of them were almost people, end quote. The widespread nature of the attitude came through in this first section. I think the author may use this to make a spiritual parallel. The various discussions and the characters having about religion seeming to be pointing us to what will be revealed as the story unfolds. On page 22, Gallio is venting about the degradation of once honorable Roman traditions, citing heroic Cornelius Captio, who says, who has so often led his legion into suicidal forays that legend has taken shape about him, for were not the gods directing a man whose life was so cheaply held and so miraculously preserved, end quote. Hints that humanity's near universal longing for a benevolent higher power to save us. Demetrius, or at least in this section, voices some of the more profound spiritual points on his discussions about gods. Having lost his family to the Romans, he found it hard to believe in a benevolent God, saying on page 38, quote, "I think it's better for the mind, sir, to disbelieve in their existence. The last time I prayed," Stephen, like you said, was on the day that our home was broken up. I knelt by my mother and we prayed to Zeus, the father of gods and men. But Zeus either did not hear us or, hearing us, had no power to aid us, or, having no power to aid us, refused to do so. Is this not a universal objection to belief in God? I.e., how could an all-powerful good God allow evil to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
it's the most common.
It never
And the
goes
best.
away. Yeah, I know.
Best.
It's
It's
logical.
the thing that confuses us the most. And especially today, when we're being told that we're perfect just the way we are, we're being told by the world we're not fallen. The only thing that begins to make that make sense is the reality that we suffer a fallen nature, and that to be restored to the fullness of goodness requires grace and our cooperation with nature. And so that makes it even more confusing, but it's the oldest problem in the world.
Yes. And to end this section over here, they say the timing of this section is perhaps providential, as today I heard someone talk about what was really going on with Palm Sunday. The author really captured it, and it was so eye-opening to see that rabble, the poor, the enslaved, were looking for a leader to start a revolution. I had always learned that they were looking for a conquering king, but the symbolism of that day pointed to hopes for a leader to start a revolt. Yes, and as it's been put to me before too, there is a lot of now that everybody wants something to happen, and why anybody. Oh, actually, there was a part in this book at some point, I must have underlined it somewhere, where they talked about how in the past any kind of Jewish rabble that was looking for somebody to start a revolt, anybody that came along and gave an idea or proposed something that was good, they would be gotten rid of as well. And so is it the frustration? Is it the frustration or something else? I don't know. But it's that same frustration that we deal with today. How could God, if there is one, allow evil to happen? And why wasn't I served on hand and foot? I just recently I saw Kanye West make comments like that. I said, "Oh, is that what he's rooted in?" It's all very odd, but again, there's another common parallel to the modern day.
That's right. And we invert that order of the political order and the spiritual order. And that's the real confusion. From the beginning of the time, from the expulsion from the garden, we have been looking as fallen men for political heaven on earth rather than spiritual eternity in heaven. There's a radical difference between the two, and that makes it not make sense to us. And we say, why do we suffer materially? And that's because God's calling us to be fulfilled spiritually. And suffering is the path to redemption. And so no suffering, no redemption.
Oh, I know. And it's a hard one. That's a hard pill to swallow, Stephen. It really is. Here's another one from Mark G. Mark says, "Frank, what a great start. Already so much to look forward to with these characters. I thought it was interesting to see how the rank and file Romans saw faults with their empire." I know. It's interesting because you think that, hey, we're Romans. But then again, look at us. Do we not all see the fault in the American empire right now? Are we all on board with each other? No. The F-16 flyovers over Yankee Stadium don't do anything for me anymore, Stephen. Right. That used to be enough to make goosebumps. And
Right.
I don't know. I have to think that this will lead to some decisions of personal honor and dignity that will go against the duties and traditions of their roles as Romans of standing. I'm actually going to be in Rome in Italy with my family for a portion of this book club. It's going to give a very cool feel as I read this book. What a great timing with it being Holy Week, and for me personally, watching The Chosen right now and heading to Rome, another uncanny pick. Having watched The Chosen over the last few months, and I was trying to get it started again so my wife can watch it, and I think we'll get that done. But that has also been very fresh with me too, and I think that is helping me visualize some things, especially since there's so much interactions with the praetors and the Roman soldiers and centurions that are there in Galilee. And so there's already so much images already in my head that I'm referencing here, but it's that must be some really great backdrop from Mark G there.
Yeah, wow, going to Rome right now is such great timing on reading this book and watching The Chosen.
I know. And how old were you able to gauge how old Demetrius is versus Marcellus? I think somebody said that Marcellus is about 23. But what about Demetrius?
I had the impression he was of the same age, but I don't remember if they mentioned it exactly. Did they?
I don't know. He almost feels older than Marcellus to me. He feels older than Marcel, but he may not be. I don't know. He's just so stoic.
I saw them as the same age, and I don't know. Probably suffered a lot more. You got the idea that Marcellus has been given everything, even though he's a brave and noble and courageous kid. He's of the elite aristocracy. And then you've got Demetrius that has been through the worst school of hard knocks known to man, who's also gentility. He's also aristocratic, but he's lost everything. So you have these two guys from the same station in life that are paired. It's almost like twins with opposite fates coming together. It's almost like the Gilgamesh story. If you've ever read that, it's really worth reading for the same reason.
That it's such a wonderful way of putting it. Twins with just different fates.
Opposite fates.
Opposite fates.
Coming from opposite directions to the same thing. It's a beautiful image.
It also makes you think about, where your mind has to be to say that, well, slaves aren't actually people. But then you have someone like Demetrius, who's, like you just said, literally on the same level, the same background, the same kinds of privileges and all that. That was his beginnings. Just because that has been taken from him and he has been demoted. Did that really take his humanity away to any kind of a degree? Or has his status in this new society that he's been brought into, is that just been changed? So it's again, it's always just putting the mirror up to, the face of everything, the standards and norms. Here's another one from Allie Q. Says, wow, what a great reading choice. Marcellus's plight immediately captivated me, but it is the interior thoughts of Demetrius that really make me feel as uneasy as he does. When Demetrius has that moment of understanding with Jesus on page 74, my goodness, haven't had a book strike me like this for a long while, and I'm a retired English teacher. I have the feeling that this is going to be a tremendous experience for all of us. I do too.
Me too.
I do too. Let's see here.
Great insight.
Yeah. Vesper says, I too was moved by the connection that Demetrius had made with the man on the donkey, or the ass. As I like the descriptions by Douglas when Demetrius is yelling, you can't do that. Douglas describes and gives life to his echo without using the word echo. Demetrius repeated the words aloud over and over again, louder and louder, until the high-walled ravine believed in them and said so. Beautiful writing. Vesper. Great writing. Let's see. I think that's we're on the end of those are the end of the thread right there. So what I would say is, wait, no. No. There's not. Here's the end of the thread. But before we get to this, how about we do a little something, because we only have 10 minutes left. Where do you think we're going next, Stephen? And then I'll let everybody know the pages we're going to read.
Okay, yeah. It's set up perfectly to be this transition, this transformation from an unknown world to knowing the unknown. So from the political to the spiritual. And I think this issue of slavery, we had to reflect on that in the United States of America too, because that less than human thing is a political statement. That politically they are less than human. But even the Senator Gallius and his son Marcellus, they know that this is a worthy man, Demetrius. So he's not less than a human ontologically, he's less than a human politically, which means he's in bondage in a way. But in the modern world, we had to ask this question. Politically, who among us today is not under the pressure of being enslaved to bad ideas? Who is not in the process of being robbed of their political autonomy? Whose family is not under attack for a kind of an ideological slavery? I contend that there's more slavery in the world today than any time in human history. It's just unrecognized. Yeah. So I think we're going to delve into themes of political to spiritual, slavery to freedom. You mentioned the word liberation. I think that's where we're heading.
Yeah, and it's also because it's such a pivotal week. And I wonder, because I've only watched the movie with adult intent maybe once, and I said, oh wow, this is incredible, and I'm going to watch it a couple of times this upcoming weekend. But I'm trying to think about what might be different so far, and I don't even care, because what I'm trying to think of in this book, I believe that for the week that's upcoming, how is Demetrius going to be able to follow? Because what he laid his eyes on, the sight that he saw with the donkey and Jesus on the donkey and this entire thing, it wasn't the crowd. The crowd was showing how fickle and emotional they are, but there was something sullen. There's something going on. There was something very focused about the man on the donkey. And something more than a king. That can't be the last time Demetrius sees him. If I were Demetrius right now, I would be, as long as his master is stationed there in Jerusalem, I would be stalking this man. I would want to be as within eyes. He has to be, visible to me at all times. He's too intriguing. So I just wonder how much we're going to get of his actual. Does he actually get to talk with Jesus? Does he get to touch him? He says he was able to touch him. I was like, oh man, you're within arm's reach.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
No, I can't. And I'm only in chapter 5 myself, first time through, and I'm reading this because of you, Frank, and it is a great choice. So it's been really, really riveting so far.
Okay, well, here's the last couple of minutes, so let's just go to the last thing that's here from NJSF, and he's always very well sourced. He says, it was a very special well-timed read, especially since I read the end of chapter 4 right on Palm Sunday, so it touched me deeply, especially with the details of the scene. We read those details together, so we're just going to move to the next part. I liked very much how Lloyd C. Douglas is weaving the historical, sociological, philosophical, and religious context. He masterfully described the more educated Greeks in the person of Demetrius, the more bellic Romans, having a more complex relationship with nobility and philosophy, the strategic importance of Gaza at the time as a choke point for the salt trade, and the difficult nature of the natives, both Bedouins and Jews, the pervasive nature of slavery, and also the difference in the quality of life depending on the actual master. I also appreciated some hints of historical accuracy on some of the characters. We'll post later in we'll post later. Also sense a subtle weaving into the story of characters that introduce them current Greek philosophies which influence Christianity, like Stoicism, Cynicism, and Hellenistic paganism. I see the Gallios as a Stoic representative, Paulos as a Cynic representative, and Demetrius bridges the paganism and Stoicism. If Gallios is really based on the brother of Seneca, there is the added link that he is dismissed he dismissed the charges against the Apostle Paul at Corinth. Okay, that's wow.
Excellent research.
Wow. Okay. I agree with the other commenters on the badass quality of Demetrius. At such a young age, he had to endure the fall from a privileged life to the assassination of the parents and to slavery. While he did manage to find a house that respected him in the galleys, it is clear there is an amount of brokenness and pain that I am curious how may surface or explode further on. Of it, he will find the grace to forgive. Yeah, that would be something. His loyalty to the galleys is also interesting to me, and I believe is due in part to the trust Marcus first placed in him. I remember, or a reminder that if you treat people right most of the time, you will get the best out of them. It was also enhanced by the fraternal treatment from Marcellus, although the thought of people or pets came to mind. And he says, here's a quote, Marcellus, stern and dignified, but occasionally forgetting to be the master and slipping absurdly into the role of intimate friend. Very funny. It was sometimes very funny it was sometimes. Lucia loved to watch them together at such moments. Of course, she had about the same relation to Tertia, but that seemed different. So there's more here, much more. I didn't see this published in the beginning, or I would have started with this and moved backwards. But the most amusing portion of the session, he says, is the comparison Demetrius made from the mobs of Rome to what he saw on Palm Sunday. He said, no, Rome had won no prizes for the politeness in her gala day multitudes, but in the spite of her forthright brutality, Rome on such occasions was hilarious. Her crowds sang, cheered, laughed. They were mischievous, merciless, vulgar, but they were merry. This was no laughter in this pilgrim throng that crowded the widening avenue today. This was a tense, impassioned, fanatical multitude, its voice of guttural murmur, as if each man canted his own distresses, indifferent to the mumbled yearnings of his neighbors. I mean, it is just gorgeously written so far, and that's what we had. Now I want to hear some final thoughts from you, if you have any, Stephen. And here's what I will say as far as reading. We're going to take it from chapter 5, the beginning of chapter 5, until you hit the face of chapter 9. So if you have this printing, we're going up until and including page 152. So 74 to 152. It's about 80 pages more. I'd like to keep it around 75 to 80 pages so it doesn't get too overwhelming and we can talk about it more. So with that, what do you got for us in closing?
Well, I'm happily surprised about the audience and being into this book in just the right way and in just the right timing. So I'm very, very pleased. I thought this would be good. I thought it would be super enjoyable once I got into the Robe, but it may be even more exciting than I thought. So to read 4 more chapters, I would highly recommend that those chapters be probably read more than once if you've got the time to do it. It's worth taking your time with this and entering into the world of the author, because he invites us in beautifully. So I just want to say, what a beautiful group. I'm really glad to be a part of this, and I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. We will see you again next Monday at 9 o'clock. And in the meantime, don't hesitate. Just, text me, call me, whatever. And I'm really enjoying this with you. And thank you for accepting the invite.
Believe me, it's my honor. Thank you, Frank. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. You too.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, hey, we are now just wrapping up. We're just wrapping up, and there's more. There's a lot more from NJSF. A lot more. Crude IT guy just put in there. Here, I'll do a couple more just because we have time. We can do it. Here's one from KTJO, and then we'll do IT guy. I never heard of this book and did not know anything about it. I got the audiobook from my library, and after the first couple of chapters, I was invested in all the characters and enjoying the story. Then chapter 4 ends with Jesus coming into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. What an emotional experience reading it from a pagan's perspective. Jesus' eyes were known to convert people with just a look. Demetrius's experience filled me with goosebumps. I love what a complex character Demetrius is and look forward to learning more about his story. Crude IT Guy says we are listening to the Audible audiobook, which is excellently read. I love the writing in this book. When it started, I was afraid I would need a thesaurus to understand it, but the author uses high vocabulary in ways you can read and learn. Yes, I have not needed a thesaurus or just a dictionary once. There were a couple of words there that I was like, but the way that it's worked into the sentence, you get it, and then you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try to use that one down the line. The author's setting descriptions are like describing in detail to a blind man. You can walk through their home in Rome with your eyes closed. Yes, exactly what I was just telling Steve and Jonathan. Like, I can smell like the floral, I can smell fragrances. I can just think about the pergolas that they're always talking about. It's going to be open. There's I don't know. It's not so much curtains, but veils and fly. I mean, it's just everything. And then, of course, the heat of the desert. You can smell that. I feel like I'm transported. This one has been magical so far. I love hearing the one-use side characters bringing the detail to the story. The multiple discussions of the gods remind me of the campfire discussion and Stand By Me. Smaller line I remembered, watch your purse, no matter the emperor. Yep, classy IT chick says it was interesting how Demetrius noticed how it was spontaneous and the apostles were unprepared and seemed embarrassed that Jesus didn't look more kingly. Yeah, that it's more, it's just something else. Now, here you go, ladies and gentlemen. I will say this. NJSF put together a breakdown, a much-needed breakdown of all of the places and the characters. If you go into the description, it's on page 2. It's the first comment on page 2. Gives you all the main characters. Gives you the characters back in Rome, the characters in Minoa, in Gaza, and then, of course, in Jerusalem. Everything is there. And NJSF put this together. Thank you so much for the efforts right there, NJ. But it's right there. If you ever get confused as to what is what and who is who, this is really, really wonderful. This is better than all the other ones that I've seen pre-published out there on the internet. So that's what we got. And we're taking it all the way up to the face of chapter 9. That's 152. 152. Thank you, guys and gals. We will see you on April 1st, the day after Easter. So that's something. I wonder when this ends. Like, what timeline? Oh, I don't want to peek ahead. But I'm just going to keep reading. All right, guys and gals. Thank you all so much. Good night.